Is minimum wages good for our country? Minimum wages are described as the bare minimum of payment that an employer is compelled to pay wage earners for labour completed during a certain time, which cannot be decreased by collective bargaining or an individual contract. It can be established by legislation, judgment of a competent authority, wage board, wage council, or industrial or labour courts or tribunals. As we know, wages and salaries are one of the essential components of a labour's life. It can be defined as the compensation made to employees for their physical and mental contributions to the production of goods and services. Furthermore, this component of income allows workers to make a living from their job, as people can use it to satisfy their needs and wants. In the context of Malaysia, many suggest that the subject should be increased. As reported by Malaysia Post, Syahir Adnin, the leader of Dewan Pemuda Ikatan Malaysia, requested for the government to increase the minimum wage in our country. He claims that it should be raised to 1,500 as soon as possible. If Malaysia is compared to countries like Thailand and Indonesia, our minimum wage is much lower than these two ASEAN neighbours. This opinion has been taken seriously as the state has reviewed the issues and raised it to 1,500 per month from May 1st, 2020. However, some economists suggest that low minimum wage can allow firms to hire more workers. As the minimum wages can be raised and lowered, what is the factor of this move and how can it affect the country economically? Is there going to be a direct impact on the labour market, including employment and unemployment? Or does it affect the business and firm? In this video, we will explain further about the factors and impact of high and low minimum wages. Now, let's take a look at the factors which influence changes in wage. Wage rates are determined by the labour market circumstances or demand and supply factors, which operate at the national and local levels. When there is a greater demand for a certain sort of skilled labour and less supply, wages will rise. On the other hand, if supply exceeds demand, people will be available at lower wage rates. Because all of these remuneration criteria are decided by immediate market forces and variables, the supply and demand compensation criterion is very closely tied to the prevailing pay, comparable wage and ongoing wage notions. The next determinant is cost of living. In many businesses, salaries are tied to the cost of living of the company, ensuring that workers are paid fairly. The cost of living of a location has a direct impact on pay rates, and workers will accept a pay that will allow them to maintain a basic level of life. Wages also will be changed as well, based on the price index number. Workers' purchasing power will be eroded as the price index rises, and they will demand greater salaries. If prices remain steady, regular pay increases may not be necessary. The last one is economic growth. Unemployment follows a cyclical pattern, and firms need for labour growth during economic expansion, and they are prepared to pay a higher salary. In a recession, however, pay growth generally stagnates, and businesses are less willing to hire workers. As a result, some say that raising the national minimum wage rate during a recession is a bad idea, since it will exacerbate the unemployment situation. Increases in minimum wage, on the other hand, do not produce unemployment while the economy is booming. The recent trends in Malaysia shows that in the past 10 years, the Malaysian government has increased the minimum wage a few times. The first implementation of minimum wages in Malaysia was introduced in July 2012, as this initiative is to help and support low-income households. The Minimum Wage Order 2012 was formed and the first minimum wages was implemented, which was effective on January 1st, 2013 with a minimum wage of 900 ringgit Malaysia of monthly wages for Peninsular Malaysia and 800 for Sabah and Sarawak. Then, in 2016, the minimum monthly wages increased to 1,000 for Peninsular Malaysia and 920 ringgit for Sabah and Sarawak. And then in 2019, the minimum wage increased to 1,000 ringgit, but for both Peninsular Malaysia and Sabah and Sarawak. While in 2020, it increased more to 1,200 after the introduction of the 2020 budget. Recently, the Minimum Wages Order 2022 was gazetted on the 27th April 2022, with monthly minimum wages set at 1,500. which is effective on 1st May 2022. This implementation could further help low-income households to survive after being affected by COVID-19 recently. The minimum wage can be raised and lowered. Of course, it will impact employees and firms. The benefit of raising minimum wage is that higher earnings will improve the overall standard of living for minimum wage workers by providing them with a more appropriate income level to handle the cost of living increases. Some proponents of raising the minimum wage estimate that a much larger number of individuals and families will move out of poverty if they earn more money. Intangible benefit that could translate into tangible benefits for both companies and employees can improve employee morale, resulting from higher wages. And also the workers will gain more money in their pockets when they had high minimum wages. Not just that, we must also know that it has its disadvantages. As a result of government-required wage increases, some firms may be forced to hire fewer workers, while people who are willing to work for lower rates may be refused employment prospects. However, it will have an impact on the price of goods because in the past, when the minimum wage was raised, the price of goods rose as well. As a result, this will affect persons who are unemployed or have low-wage jobs. Business owners frequently note the challenge of providing sufficient encouragement to spur workers to put maximum effort into their job duties, and that this is particularly problematic with low-wage workers who will feel that their job efforts are really not keeping them out of poverty. Substantially increasing operating expenses for companies that will then increase the prices of products and services to cover their increased labor costs. Obviously, when companies need to pay the high minimum wages with less profit, in such circumstances, they had to lay off employees in order to reduce their expenses. However, this will also cause a company to not make a lot of profit due to lack of workers. If workers are reduced, then production of goods will be reduced. In contrast, low minimum wages are really good for companies because at low wage rates, a company's expenses to hire employees is low. This situation will make it easier for a company to increase profits because many employees can increase production. However, the employees who had the low minimum wages will face some bad impacts. Inflation is a situation where the increase in the price of goods and services happen. And this year, Malaysia faces a high rate of inflation which causes the price of raw materials to increase and even the price of goods sold by traders also increase. During inflation, workers who face low wages will face a shortage of money because their salary rates will not be enough to cover the rising price rate. This will cause workers to live hard and the ability to accommodate living is low. Let us recap what has been discussed in this video. First, minimum wages are the pay that an employee can receive from employers. The minimum can be set low and also high by the government. The factors of wages are demand and supply, cost of living, and economic growth. Next, both high minimum wage and low minimum wage has impacts on the economy. High minimum wage will give employees more purchasing power as income increases, but it also makes it hard for the firm as they will have a larger cost of production. For a low minimum wage rate, companies will benefit by having less expenses, but households and workers will have a less income to enjoy goods and services, especially during inflation. That's all for this video. Let us know in the comment section your opinion on this topic and should minimum wage be raised or lowered in your country. Thank you.